teachers of Reddit, when did you realize a kid was gifted? We took standardized tests like the second week of school. Hadn't really done much academics yet as it was elementary school, grade 5, and most of what we'd done was routines and introduction/games. Kids scored at a 10th grade level in math and 9th grade in reading. Okay, whatever. Impressive but not unheard of. Except this kid was at the worst school in the state. Literally. Ranked dead last. His whole schooling career. Nobody else in my class scored above a 6th grade level in anything, and most were 3/4 grade level. I basically had to do entirely separate lesson plans for this kid, while the rest of my class did multiplication facts. I had a coding curriculum and was teaching him basic languages. He had his own reading group in addition to the higher reading group. It was even more incredible because he'd always been in trouble and in the principal's office the years before. I sent him to ICE once, all year. Really low for that school. Kids on other classes went literally daily. I had a few go once a week. I begged his mom to switch him out of that school track. Said he'd fill out any paperwork, write any letters. It was my only year as a teacher. Not sure what happened to him. Mom never contacted me. He finished the year by shattering all of his records on testing exams. Literally the 0.1% on his tests. He's legitimately one of the smartest kids I'd ever met. From the poorest school with the worst conditions I've ever seen. Imagine a kid whose behavior was so bad you had to send him to the International Space Station as a punishment. You get in the rocket. Now, I read ISIS and was really confused for a second. After less than 1 year of music lessons, it was clear the student would likely become a concert pianist when he learned 15 of Bach's 2-part inventions from memory and played them brilliantly. Username checks out. Dude, this guy always has excellent musical anecdotes and stories. One of my favorite redditors. This kid was always bright, but never really inspired by much of what he did. Seemed a little lazy, but wasn't troublesome. He was just kind of a neutral kid in the class. We did one day of Lewis structures, and he thought it was too easy. Gave him a harder worksheet which he finished in like 3 seconds. So I gave him an organic formula that had 12 different isomers and some resonance structures. He came up with all of them in less than 15 minutes, including ones that had to do with how the object would look in 3D, even though we never covered it. Kid is currently working on his PhD at Yale in organic chemistry. Was this in high school? That's impressive for an undergraduate. I'm an organic professor and resonance really screws most of my students for some reason. It was in high school. I have my master's in organic, so I like to sprinkle it into my high school class more than others. I was shocked when this kid was asking questions about chirality to me, not using the term, but expressing the idea, and had to break out my orgo book to find problems for him, while the other students were still grasping. If we share 2 electrons we get a covalent bond. The kid just got it, and could see how the structures went together, and how pieces would fit. I had him doing mechanisms pretty quickly just to keep him interested. He essentially took a different class than the rest of his peers from that point until the end of the year. I knew when he surprised me by reassembling an engine out of a car all by himself in a single 90-minute class period. It was right before school let out for COVID. I had to hurry up and get some projects thrown back together quickly since school was closing. He asked to do it, so I let him try and went off to do other things. By the end of the class it was completely assembled. Never asked me for help, and it was working. Definitely gifted. My sister was 20 and had an old Civic. My dad is a mechanic and came home from work to find she had taken half the engine out, cleaned and sprayed it pink, and reinstalled all the parts herself with no help. He was so impressed he started her apprenticeship, first female in the company, a week later, and 6 years later she was headhunted to another company and is part of a pit crew for a rally car, and also has her own race car which is actually her first Civic that she souped up herself. Sweet. I have some kick-ass females in the program. My hope is for them to go on and continue into the trades. There is so much to gain from doing so. An interesting test for toddlers is to see if they can hold an extended, back and forth conversation with adults. Most kids at this age, and most grown-ass adults, are just asking for something, or telling you something. I was at the park one day swinging my EXS 5-year-old daughter. There was what seemed to be a 5-year-old, or less, child swinging next to mine. I swear. We ended up having a full-blown conversation. The child's enunciation was on point. It was as if I was in a Gico commercial. I asked the mom how the child could possibly speak that well, as it seemed inhuman. She said the dad is a children's speech pathologist. Coach's kid. Every time. Biology teacher here. Had a new student come in at age 15. He didn't talk much, but he did all his work as asked, and did it well. One day we were having a class discussion about something, and he joined in. It ended up being a back and forth between just the two of us, and at some point I realized I was discussing pretty high level stuff with a 15-year-old. He's a neurosurgeon now. What were you discussing? It started off as a talk about the ethics of human cloning and genetic engineering. We ended up getting into the detail of the mechanics of it. He was asking questions, understanding the answers and immediately seeing the repercussions, and elaborating on his opinions. It was a great experience. I'm not a school teacher, but I used to be a hockey instructor way back. During the summers, I was a hockey camp leader. Each week of the 8 weeks of summer, I would teach 20 to 30 kids how to play hockey. We were on the ice for 2 hours in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. But we had the kids from like 8 AM to 5 PM, so there was a lot of time to fill. There was only one kid I remember. His name was Charles. He would be registered for 5 to 6 of the 8 weeks of camps we ran. Very quiet, sweetest kid you'll ever meet. Was 9 to 10 years old. He was pretty shy, and for whatever reason had really taken to me. So I was his go-to buddy, or whatever. One day when we were trying to kill time, we went to a rec room, where there were a bunch of board games and crap. Charles asked if him and I could play a game, and I said sure. Most of the games were already taken, and one of the only ones left was chess. So I asked him if he knew how to play, and he didn't. So I said I would teach him. I showed him the basics, what each piece does, the point of the game, etc. I had been playing chess for years, so was pretty decent. We did a practice game where I didn't really try, and he understood the game shockingly quickly, to the point I could see him laying traps and that for me in the practice game. So we decided to play for real, and I tried my best. I got absolutely whooped. He started explaining how he planned certain strategies like 5 moves in advance, thinking on a completely different level. We played 4 times and he dusted me every time. His mind was incredible. I always remembered his name and looked him up on LinkedIn a while back. He's in med school and won a bunch of awards. Pretty sure he skipped a few years. He's accomplished pretty much everything I wanted to accomplish, but in 8 fewer years. The kid is absolutely incredible. He was a shit hockey player though. Kid took like 15 camps over 3 years and I think he somehow got worse. Absolutely hopeless on skates. The real take-home message of the day. Doctors generally suck at hockey. JK. The one I know of. One of those brother-in-law's sister's deals. Who went to Dartmouth on a hockey scholarship. Amazing person. Foreign exchange student from China in the 8th grade. His writing abilities far exceeded the majority of even the accelerated class. I moved him from regular English to accelerated, and not only was his writing strong, his insights were so deep and thoughtful. At the end of the year, I learned not only was he a top student in my class, he won Student of the Year in Spanish as well. Some people are just annoyingly good at writing. It's almost infuriating. I would sit over an essay for hours and struggle to have it make sense. And my boyfriend would look at it for a couple minutes and come up with way better insights and phrasing. In German, our native language, and in English. He writes poems when bored. I got a collection of love poems by him. Hell, the man wrote me a short play for Christmas one year. Edit. The man is really intelligent. Studying maths ATM. Has not particularly great at real life adulting and doing practical tasks though. Close bracket. I've always been considered pretty good at writing by my teachers and peers, but my ducking brother man, he's 6 years younger than me and never showed much interest in school. I left home when he was 11 years old. So I never got to really see what his writing was like when he was younger. When he got to college, he sent me an essay and asked me what I thought of it. I don't even remember the topic now, but I remember thinking the content was really interesting and wanted to probe his thoughts on the material. I was really shocked when he told me he wrote it. I was ducking blown away when he told me to read the first letter of the first word of each line down the left side of the page. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and desert you. Never gonna make you cry. Never gonna tell a lie. The little ducker had somehow managed to write a great essay, and for the length of the entire paper managed to use the first letter of each word on each line to spell out rickastly lyrics to rickroll his professor as a joke. It went on for multiple pages. I can't even pretend to wrap my head around trying to set that up. Not a teacher, but a student with a gifted kid in his class. In 3rd grade we had a new student come in who had just moved to the country with his family. Our teacher saw he was smart. She challenged him with some math we were meant to learn in a couple weeks. He solved the problems no problem. Next she tried some 4th grade level math. Again he solved it with no problems. After that she called in one of the 5th grade teacher and she gave him some problems meant for 5th graders. As expected he solved those without any problems. They kept going until he got a question partially right. I believe by that point they were giving him stuff intended for early/mid-year 6th grade students. Last I heard this kid got a degree in mathematics from Carnegie Mellon University. I'm a spec ed teacher, and one of the other teachers had a kid really struggling in math, like down to 3 grade levels. I was asked to test a bunch of kids including him, some of whom were ESL. So I decided to use a test that strips away most of the language to test pure math skills. This kid scored easily 3 grades above, and even higher in algebra. He is actually a superstar in math, but struggles with written language. What an awesome moment to be able to tell him that he's not behind in math, but actually really good at it. Edit. Thank you for my first gold. This was a very special moment in my teaching career that I will always treasure as it was an opportunity to change the kid's concept of himself as a learner. Boosting a kid up is what I live for. One thing that's always bothered me is how early we start teaching word problems. Reading comprehension and math are 2 different skills. Let them grow a bit before trying to mush them together. I bet the situation you wrote about is fairly common because of it. Not a traditional teacher, but I taught guitar at a mom and pop guitar store in my hometown. A few years ago, a lady brought a 7-year-old daughter in for formal training. Now, 99/100th times, a kid that young wants to play the guitar until they get one. After that, it sits in a corner and collects dust until it makes its way to Goodwill or something. This girl had legitimate talent though. She managed to teach herself very basic chords on her own, and had even began writing music. Everything I taught her, she learned within seconds. I also discovered through comparison with my own ear training that she had perfect pitch. Musicians are dicks. Many of us rarely recognize or appreciate true talent in someone else. But this girl was truly something special. If she isn't a famous/successful musician someday, it will be a travesty. My son never showed an interest in music, just didn't care. Or so I thought. 6th grade came around, and school hosted a band placement fair of sorts and my son said he only wanted to do percussion. So did a lot of kids apparently, and the percussion teacher was not shy about dashing hopes and dreams lol. Anyway, my son goes up for his tryout, and his rhythm is perfect and repeats everything the instructor does with ease. Blew my mind. So he does well learning percussion, but scores low in class because he talks too much. 6 months go by, and we are at a friend's house who has a piano. My son sits down and starts playing Star Wars perfectly. Has never played a piano before. How do you know how to play a piano? The keys are just like a xylophone. How do you know how to play songs from Star Wars? Shrugs. It's how I remember it sounding. Game of Thrones theme song? Westworld? Took minutes to learn by ear. Fun and easy. Just amazes me. He bought a guitar because he wanted to. Tuned it himself with help of tuning forks. Is now teaching himself the ballads of Metallica. I mean, why not? Has also teaching himself video editing. and is growing his list of paying clients. Is he a genius? Nope. I like to think of him as just a regular, gifted dude enjoying himself. I'm happy to see him happy. That is success. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Reddit videos.